welcome to another edition of the Home Truths podcast on Wild One with the Stephensons. I'm joined again today by Elliot and Oliver from Stephensons. Last time out, guys, we were talking about the new government proposals, the new reforms that are in there, likely to come in the next few years. We talked mainly last time about the idea of seller packs and all this kind of stuff linked in within some of the background, but there's more in the new proposals than just that. Can you kind of fill us in on what else is involved in this? What other exciting things are on the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big impacts, certainly for us as a company and wider in the industry, is the qualifications that are going to be required and the additional regulation on estate agents. As it stands, regulation is effectively voluntary. There are various ways of having qualifications from an RICS member through to NAEA that you guys are, which is what a lot of the residential guys are. But there's nothing to stop Mr. Joe Bloggs next door setting up his estate agency. There'll be a few hoops to jump through, but by and large, anybody can become an estate agent quite quickly. And I think a lot of things that we were discussing last time was about, building trust into a transaction and allowing everybody to commit into a transaction. And I think that also is helped by the estate agent and the professionals that you're dealing with at the beginning have the necessary qualifications so that the information that you're being supplied with is valid, and you can trust it and you can commit to that transaction because you know it's all in good faith.
You see, that I find that really interesting. Can you just wake up one morning and say, I'm an estate agent?
Oh, yeah, technically, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, setting up any business, you need certain insurances in place. But the simple answer is yeah. Dave can go and set up Dave's estate agents tomorrow. That's really quite easy. And I'm not gonna have a problem with anybody who sets up on their own. Hats off to them for giving it a go. But there's varying levels of quality, in my opinion. And I think when you come back to the whole transaction, when you think about who's involved in a transaction, you've got a surveyor. They have to be regulated and qualified. You've got a financial advisor, a mortgage advisor, has to be regulated and qualified. You've got a solicitor, or at least a conveyancing executive who is qualified to and regulated to a certain level. And then you've got the estate agents who don't have to be regulated at all, and in the first part of the transaction do the main body of the agreements. Whilst none of it is legally binding, they set the expectations for sellers and buyers in the main. So I've got absolutely no problem whatsoever in the government bringing in regulations for our industry. It should have been in place, in my opinion, a long time ago.
Because you're the people who pull all this together, aren't you, at the beginning of it? That's what people want an estate agent to do, because in theory, you can put a board outside your own house without anybody's name on it and saying for sale, can't you? You can do that, but then you've still got to go through the other side of it. So your role as estate agents is to give the best advice that you can to pull all those things together, as well as the marketing and all that side of it as well. And so this will bring in better regulation. I suppose this is about a confidence thing, isn't it? Really, that the confidence of the seller and the buyer to know who they're dealing with.
I think that's right. I mean, I think to be clear, what I'm not saying is that just because you're regulated already means that you're a fantastic estate agent.
No.
There's plenty of estate agents out there that don't have any necessary the qualifications that we're discussing. They can be fantastic agents, but absolutely when the proposals that come in that we discussed last time are relying on people putting bids forward in the fullness of information, they need to know that information has been supplied, in as I said earlier, in good faith, and then that's all about confidence. If you are regulated, that gives that buyer that additional confidence.
Yeah.
Because there's recourse ultimately if it's not correct.
Absolutely, and I think there is the problem, is that there isn't a great deal. Yes, there are some governing bodies within our industry, but they are not always dealing with people who have qualified to a certain level. There might be people who have worked in the industry for 25 years more and have no qualification to their name, and they're absolutely fantastic agents. there might also be people who've done it for 5 minutes but have got a qualification after their name. You know, so I think bringing in something that is just transparent across the industry, that says for you to work within this workplace, you must be proving your competency to this level, or if you are new into this industry, everybody new coming in has to be to this level, then I think that's only a good thing for everybody transacting. Coming back to what we said right at the beginning, whereas the final piece of the jigsaw, the people who aren't regulated will become regulated, and hopefully makes the whole transaction. You touched on trust. You know, that is something that estate agents, due to previous regimes in many decades ago, lost the trust of the public, and we've worked very hard, I think, collectively as a group to try and bring that back. But if you've got something that is setting the standard, and if you don't keep to that standard, you can be struck off, that's got to be a good thing.
It used to happen, didn't it, on TV quiz shows? You'd come in and, what do you do for a living? I'm an estate agent. And the audience would boo, wouldn't they? And things like that, you know. But you spoke earlier about the fact that both of you got qualifications. I'm going to call them letters after your name, qualifications that you've got there. So what? Just to give a little bit of an insight very quickly, what kind of things do you have to go through to get those qualifications? What's the process that you have to go through?
To be clear, very different. Elliot is a surveyor and I'm an estate agent, so you know, I guess the best way to describe my qualifications is I've done my training on the job. You know, when I started the company I started at, very similar to us, self-regulate their staff, and I was told very quickly within the first year of me starting my role that I had to carry out some qualifications, and that was a number of modules within the sector, from law, construction, sales, health and safety, lots of different things that are part and parcel of being an everyday estate agent. And then you had to go and carry out some exams, and if you passed your exams you became qualified, and if you didn't you had to do it again. But the nice thing for a estate agency is that you can learn on the job. Elliot's is somewhat different. They're different. My qualification is through a recognised National Association of Estate Agents, which is now more commonly known as Property Mark, and Elliot's is the RICS qualification. So yours is more educational based initially, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's different routes. There is an experience route, but it's quite a long-winded way of doing it. The traditional route into being a member of the RICS is to go to university and get an accredited degree. So you can't just do any degree. You've got to do a degree which is relevant to property. So you spend 3 years getting an undergraduate degree, and then you've got a minimum of 2 years training. After which you sit an exam in front of several of your peers, which is probably one of the most daunting things I've ever done in my life, and it's not easy. But at the end of it, you become a chartered surveyor, albeit in various different sectors. You know, I qualified as a chartered surveyor in general practice, which covers valuation, estate agency, and lots of other. But a building surveyor will go down a different pathway. A quantity surveyor will go down a different pathway. So chartered surveyor is very much a broad term, but you will have a specialism within that.
And I think the important thing about both the qualifications is that, you know, there's the CPD to come with that as well. You have to be continuously reporting to them every year that you are continuing to keep up to the standards expected. And I think as a minimum, I mean, Elliot's is the kind of top level. In my view, everybody doing the job I do every day should be minimum qualified through Property Mark and the NAEA to level 3, you know, and there's different levels you can clearly keep going to, but I think level 3 would be the absolute minimum. I
think the CPD is the key point. Getting qualified is one thing, but if you get qualified in 2020 and you don't do any CPD for 10 years, you're way behind the times. So there's a minimum expectation. You have to submit every year a form to say, this is what I've done. You have to do certain topics every so many years to keep yourself fresh. And certainly on the surveyor side of things, if you're in evaluation, you've got to tell them how many evaluations you're doing or what sort of level they are, you know, just so they know that you're keeping up to speed with relevant regulations.
Just thinking, you guys work for a well-known local firm. It's your own firm. People can see you. You're sat opposite me in the studio now talking. There's been a big growth, hasn't there, in recent years of the kind of online ways of selling it. We won't name any names or anything like that. Will these new reforms have the same impact on them? Will they find it more difficult to...
It's a hard one, is that, because there's been some big change in, we're alluding to online agents and franchised agents, shall we call them. I think the problem with a lot of that is that they're all self-employed in their own right. They might be working under a name or under a brand, But I think the onus is on the company, whoever that, we won't mention names, but the company, whoever they might be, they're going to have to change their entry level, because if you're, the best young up and coming agent in York and you've done it for 5 years, and the company that you've worked for have not implemented training courses or qualifications, and you are still a very good agent, and you go to one of these options to set up on your own, if you like, they're going to have to set those standards. It's as simple as that. So I think if it comes in, it's just going to have to be a given. You're going to have to do it, aren't you? Otherwise, you're going to have to go and change your career.
Well, that's it. It's going to be.
It's really simple, really.
This is a bit like, I don't know, if you get a McDonald's franchise, if somebody owns a McDonald's, but you're selling the same products and you're following the same regulations and you're following the same, same cooking instructions.
It shouldn't matter whether you're
kind
working
of
for a franchise, an online, a local. The standards should be the same across the board. And as we have alluded to, there's some very good agents who are self-employed, franchise, working other businesses. But it's making sure that everybody's at that level. And unfortunately, as happens in most industries, there's always a few rogue agents, or probably the same in the car industry. There's probably some rogue salesmen that have spoiled the reputation for a lot of people, and it's trying to bring that standard up.
I think the problem is at the moment, Dave, is that a lot of those companies that have set up these franchise or these abilities to set up on their own, I've not seen any of them in the investigation I've done into them see that they are actively looking for people with qualifications.
Right.
That's my opinion.
So that's why they're going to have to change big style then.
But ultimately, we as a company, just to give you some insight, is that every single member of our team is encouraged and advised to carry out the property market qualifications, and we've got a number of people at the moment who are going through that process. The good thing about us is that we're a much wider team, so we can help them on their day-to-day and through their qualifications. And I'd say the only members of staff that we really have who haven't done it are people with 20 years plus of experience. And that's where this is going to shake it up, really, because you are going to teach a few people to suck eggs. But if you want to continue in this industry, that's what you're going to have to do. And I think that's something that is slightly different, in my opinion, with some of these guys that are setting up very quickly on their own, is that I don't think there's any encouragement or any self-regulation within that's going, you must be to this standard with us. And that's something I would have liked to have seen, of the, agent A franchise goes, you can come and work for us, or you can come and work under our brand, under our franchise, but we would want you to be at this qualification within a certain amount of years. Most of our counterparts in other countries are, you go to America, they've all got to have a license. You go to Australia, they've all got to have a license. Well, so they should, and whether we're talking about qualifications or whether we're talking about deposits or information packs, we just seem to be so behind the curve. And we alluded to in the last podcast about the system being broken. The English system bluntly is.
Is there a desire within the industry itself, though, to improve? Because you need that, don't you? Or is this, you sound as though you're really happy about the idea that these regulations are coming in and everything and the positives that it brings with you. We've touched in previous podcasts on how it might be beneficial to you in terms of less wasting time, I suppose. But overall in the industry, do you get the feel that the industry wants to change? We're going to do this.
I think there's a lot of people who'll go, yes, I think this is great.
Yeah.
After the event.
But the reality of it is, actually, it's not quite as black and white as the news that's come out says. There's an awful lot of infrastructure that needs to be sorted from the PACS side of things. There's an awful lot more in terms of qualification things, because it's all right them saying we're going to bring this in 2029, but one of our most senior and successful agents we've got has done the job for 35 years, hasn't got his qualification. What are they saying to him? That by 2029, if you haven't got your qualification, you can't work anymore? Because it's not quite I don't think that's fair. You know, I think there's got to be proper planning in place that gives everyone an opportunity to get qualified. And I'm not sure.
Maybe the expertise and the experience will count some way towards that qualification.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think, you know, all the comments that have come out have generally been positive that I've seen. But it's about, yes, these are great ideas, but it's all going to be in the implementation, the detail, and going on to the qualifications point. It's making sure, in my view, that it's not one shoe fits all. It's,
yes, I agree.
There is your traditional route. You do your as a youngster coming in, you go through a process, but there's got to be some pathway for someone that's done it for 35 years to be able to say, look, here's a portfolio of work that I've done. I'll maybe, you know, do some short form exams, and it's a sort of fast route forward. But
they did something similar in teaching. I'm a former teacher from a long time ago now, but they did something similar there where there was such a shortage of people that needed to do the job that actually it was a case of, let's bring people in who've got lots of industry experience, life experience, if you like, of it, and then make a faster path to becoming formally qualified.
I think, in my opinion, there also is an option here to have different tiers, because, you know, if you're a business owner, I think your expectation should be higher in terms of your level of you know, you've got a much bigger responsibility to ensure those standards are set over a, you know, with all respect, a 22-year-old coming into the industry who's trying to start their career. I think if somebody has the responsibility of running the business, I think that their tier should be higher. And if I was involved in that decision-making process, I would have different levels of minimum in. But if you were then wanting to go and set up on your own, for example, that would be fine, but you would have to be at the highest level and I think that would improve standards in the industry greatly, because the problem that you have is if you're working under someone who is Elliot's qualification, for example, or mine, is that's fine, but you might be trained very well, but if you're not at that level and you go and set up on your own and you're at the lower level, that allows standards, in my opinion, to potentially drop. So I haven't seen anything that in the papers that have come out, but that would be my two penneth in terms of how that qualification to continue encouraging youth into the industry. But then if you've been in the industry by, say, 10 years or 5 years, whatever it might be, you then must have, it's all right doing CPD, but take it to the next level. And if we're going to reform it, I've said this for years, if we're going to reform it, let's do it properly. And I think the thing we've got to be careful of when we're having these conversations is that they've come out with a lot of information in the last few days, but I think there's a number of subjects that are completely different things. I think implementing packs can happen with the right system relatively quickly, but I think you've got to be fair to those that are in the industry to give them enough time to get qualified. And a couple of years without any direction on what that's going to be will come around very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it looks as though the roadmap suggests that there'll be some voluntary scenario over a couple of years, and then there'll be probably a backstop date where those qualifications need to be in place. I think my biggest concern is that if it's implemented incorrectly, there's a barrier to entry. You know, your young up-and-coming estate agents, they see all the work that they've got to do and go, I'll go do something else. And similarly, at the opposite end of the spectrum, if it's too hard for someone in there approaching retirement age and they think, well, I'll just bring my retirement forward a couple of years, I'm not going to go through all this rigmarole, and you suddenly lose a lot of good agents, or potentially good agents.
The one thing we haven't talked about is cost.
Well, yeah,
because clearly there is a cost element, and it's probably going to fall on the agency. And will that raise the bar in terms of remuneration within the industry? I'd like to think that it does. I'd love that it would raise the bar, much more attractive to want to go and work in that industry, because I'm classified as a professional, which all the bodies that we talked about that work around us are classed as. I think that's got to be a good thing. But ultimately, what does that end up doing? Why are all our European counterparts charging 3, 4, 5 times what we charge? Because of exactly what I've just talked about. There is a high level and a high bar of entry into that sector, and that's something that, you know, when we've had 10, 15 years of race to the bottom fees and online agents coming in doing everything for 10 quid, this is going, in my opinion, completely the other way. I think that could be a bit of a rude awakening to the sector. I'm not against it, but it's something that we again the government have to factor in.
So let's wrap things up, guys, by fast forwarding to 2029. What does the ideal home buying system market look like in 2029 once all this has gone through smoothly?
Well, I think a lot of the proposals that have been put out do sound quite good and probably not far off the ideal. I mean, for me, I think starting from the beginning and the agent making sure that they've got the necessary qualifications to provide the confidence to the buyer that the information that's been presented is good to them in form of a sales pack. I think that's a fantastic idea. Making sure that sales pack will be broadly accepted across the sector and that you're not going to have duplication. That's absolutely key. In terms of the next stage, in terms of accepting an offer and an offer becoming binding, that's quite a difficult one for me, because there's an accepting an offer by the estate agent, and there's a small window where it's not in solicitors' hands yet. You can't, to be bound at that point by simply an estate agent saying yes, that offer is accepted. That's not contractually binding from my perspective, and that there's always a window of opportunity there for the gazumping to happen. I just don't see any way around that. But I think if someone's contractually tied in at the instruction of solicitors, whereby everybody's got the information they needed to have done to make an offer that doesn't really need to move, everyone can start incurring costs through the legal process because they've got some certainty.
I think that's right. You're never going to completely eradicate the window frame, but what we're trying to do is make the window frame as narrow as possible. Is that someone might change their mind from today to tomorrow, but if it takes a week to get into contract and it takes a week to get that deposit in place, and I think the FCA have to be involved in that as well because it's a financial transaction. A week gives me way more confidence than 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months in some case, because every day that goes by there's another chance.
But I do think there's been a slight misrepresentation in some of the headlines that this is all going to stop gazumping. I don't think it will, because the gazumping happens where you've got two interested parties, you accept one offer and you reject the other one. They will come back the next day and up their offer. That's when the gazumping happens, not 2, 3, 4 months down the line, generally.
Very rarely, yeah. To answer your question, which is how do we see it, my view is to limit fall throughs and to speed the process up. So there is the lack of waiting that builds the frustration between everybody, and for me, if they can implement the process properly, I am more than happy to have a let's call it an onboarding couple of weeks to get your house ready to enter market. That's definitely, I think, a time frame that most motivated sellers would be prepared to accept for near certainty on the back end. And that transaction knows that once you've agreed your sale and you've gone into contract, we're talking 4 or 5 weeks. We know as agents that can happen, because it does happen. I mean, we had one last year from entry to market to completion, 21 days. So the market can prove it can do it.
Yeah.
But the system, it doesn't work regularly enough.
Yeah, and that's something we've not really touched on, probably don't have time to do today, is on the conveyancing side. There's a lot of backing from the government to try and streamline that process with assistance of AI and collation of data, so it's much quicker than it currently is, and it should be really.
Well, we'll see how things pan out in the coming months and years. Gents, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come and talk to us on the Home Truths podcast again. Oliver, Elliot, thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.